There is a moment no one sees, a moment before the chase begins, before he knows he's chasing, before desire has a name or a target, before his body stirs, before his thoughts loop, before his dreams make room for her silhouette. It is the moment she returns to herself, fully, silently, unapologetically. It is not loud, it is not vengeful, it is not designed to provoke, but it does. It provokes everything in him that has grown dull from the predictability of pursuit. It wakes the sleeping wolf. It triggers something buried, primal, sacred, the eternal masculine, aching for something worthy of surrender. When a woman stops waiting to be chosen, she becomes the one he searches for. Not because she changes herself to fit his fantasy, but because she dares to become something real, something whole, something sovereign. And men, they can sense this wholeness before they understand it, before they can name what has changed, before their mind catches up with what their nervous system already knows. She is no longer performing, no longer scanning for signs, no longer trying to be worthy of someone who cannot meet her depth. She is simply home, in her body, in her essence, in her knowing. And this is where the energy shifts. This is where the tide turns. The feminine, once fractured by doubt, clicks into place, and without saying a word, without altering her tone, without sending a single signal outward, she starts pulling inward, and the world around her adjusts, not because she demanded it, because she remembered. And remembrance is magnetic. He won't understand it at first, why he's suddenly thinking of her, why her silence feels louder than anyone's attention, why her disinterest feels heavier than affection ever did, why, when she stopped leaning forward, his world tilted toward her. She didn't pull away to punish. She pulled away to protect. She withdrew from performance, not from love. She detached from illusion, not from connection. And that distinction, that quiet revolution of energy, it does something to a man. It disorients him, because the rules just changed. The chase he was used to leading has turned inward. She is no longer running toward him. She is walking deeper into herself. And this is what draws him in. He will say he misses her, but what he misses is not her availability. It is the mirror she held up without trying, the way she made him feel seen just by being. He will say he's confused, but what he's really feeling is the gap between who he was in her presence and who he is without it. She didn't seduce him with words. She seduced him with truth, with the calm certainty of a woman who has stopped abandoning herself. She knows now. There is nothing more magnetic than a woman who has nothing to prove. And there is nothing more confusing to a man who built his identity on being pursued by women who forgot their worth. This is not strategy. This is alchemy. The transmutation of lack into essence. The silent shift from needing to being, from chasing to attracting, from hoping to knowing. And in that knowing, she becomes untouchable. Not inaccessibly cold, but energetically sovereign. She does not beg for time. She does not ask for crumbs. She does not chase ghosts. She lets absence speak. She lets silence shape. She lets the masculine feel the cost of her light by no longer offering it to the unready. And that's when he begins to feel her, in the quiet moments, in the pauses between distractions, in the eyes of other women who don't know how to see him the way she did. He begins to remember things she never said, the way she held space without controlling it, the way she allowed him to exist without interruption, the way she never needed to prove her place in his world. She simply was. And now, she is not. And this absence, it isn't empty. It's full of every piece of her he overlooked, every intuition she swallowed, every softness he mishandled, every gaze she offered freely, now withheld like a secret spell. He doesn't know why he feels unsteady, why her presence lingers in his mind like incense in an empty room, why her detachment cuts deeper than confrontation ever could. It's because she didn't just walk away. She reclaimed something ancient, something divine, the archetype of the self-possessed feminine, the one Jung spoke of, the one every man secretly longs to meet, has risen in her, and he is no longer the center of her orbit. She has become the moon now, the tide now, the pull he cannot resist, not because she plays games, but because she plays no longer. She is done trying to be palatable, done dimming her vision so others feel safe, done holding the weight of men who confuse access with worthiness, and now, he feels the difference. He doesn't know why, but he wants to call, to test the waters, to see if the door is still open. But it isn't. Not because she's punishing him, but because she no longer lives at the address where he left her. She moved, energetically, spiritually, psychologically, and now to reach her, he must rise, not perform, not convince, rise. She no longer responds to fragments, to half-truths, to breadcrumbed affection disguised as love. She has returned to her source, and from there she radiates. And radiance cannot be bought. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be begged for. It is earned through presence, through truth, through alignment. And this is why he begins to chase. Not her, but the part of himself he lost in her light. The man he became when she stopped performing and started becoming. He is chasing the feeling of being close to the divine. And she is no longer waiting to be chosen, because she already chose herself. And when a woman values herself fully, something unexplainable happens. The world begins to follow, men begin to awaken, and the game falls away. All that's left is energy, and energy never lies. He doesn't recognize it at first. The ache, the pull, the silence that used to feel like a lull now hums like a signal. It's in the space where her name used to be, in the quiet between distractions, in the sound of a laugh that doesn't quite reach the marrow the way hers did. It's subtle at first, then it grows. Because when a woman reclaims her energy, the men who fed from it begin to starve, not for attention, for something deeper, for the frequency only she emitted, back when she didn't know how powerful it was. He begins to retrace steps, not out of strategy, but because something in him is unsettled, like he missed a turn, like he lost something sacred and can't remember where, like he blinked and she was gone. And that's the paradox. He didn't notice the moment she shifted, because her value wasn't in her words. It was in the absence of desperation. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She didn't demand recognition. She simply stopped overgiving. She stopped offering intimacy to ambivalence. She stopped waiting for reciprocity from a man still hiding from himself. And when she stopped, he started. He started to notice the difference between comfort and connection, between availability and alignment, between women who want to be chosen and women who choose themselves. The former are everywhere, but the latter, they are rare, uncommon, dangerous in their stillness, disorienting in their peace. Because a woman who values herself cannot be owned. She cannot be conquered. She can only be met. And that meeting requires death. The death of the ego, the death of the boy who wants to be mothered, the death of the performer, the seducer, the manipulator, because she will not respond to the mask. She will not mirror back the man he pretends to be. She will only reflect the man who dares to emerge once the mask is gone. He may try to summon her, to reach out casually, to test the waters. But casual cannot reach a woman who has become depth. She is no longer in the shallow end. And so he begins to feel something he doesn't want to name, loss, not of possession, but of possibility. She represented something he wasn't ready to hold, something vast, something holy. And now that she is no longer in orbit, his life feels quieter, but not in the comforting way. In the way absence reminds us of what we didn't hold with reverence when we had the chance. He is chasing now, but not her. Not really. He is chasing a memory, a feeling, the version of himself that came alive in her presence. And that is the secret. Men do not chase women. They chase how they felt around certain women. And when a woman values herself, truly, she creates a sanctuary for truth. She becomes the place a man can finally rest from pretending. And if he leaves, he doesn't forget the feeling, because there is no substitute for peace. There is no mimicry for soul. And so he begins the internal hunt. Not the hunt for her body, but for the frequency she carried. He wonders how she knew to walk away with such grace, how she knew not to plead, not to collapse, not to turn pain into drama. He wonders how she made surrender look like power, but he doesn't understand. She didn't surrender to him. She surrendered to herself. And in that surrender, she remembered a truth too many women forget. When you are your own home, you stop asking to be someone else's refuge. You become the place people long to return to, even if they don't deserve entry anymore. And now he stands outside a door she no longer opens. Not because she hates him, but because she finally loves herself more than the fantasy of his potential. And potential, unclaimed, becomes poison. She knows this now. She knows that a man who is not ready to rise will try to pull her back into the familiar mud. He will call it love. He will call it fate. He will call it a spark. But she knows better. She knows that spark was her own light, reflecting off someone still too covered in shadows to see his own. So she walks, not away from him, but toward herself. And he feels it. He feels the moment she stops scanning the horizon for his return. He feels the moment she plants her roots elsewhere. He feels the severing not as cruelty, but as consequence. Because this is the truth most avoid. Love is not the hook. Presence is. And her presence was divine. He didn't realize it when she offered it freely. But now that it's gone, he begins to see, not the woman, but the mirror, the memory, the man he could have been, had he chosen courage over comfort. He may never say it, but he will carry it, in the quiet corners of his life, in the lovers who touch his body but not his soul, in the nights when success feels empty and attention feels weightless. Because she taught him the difference, not in lectures, not in ultimatums, but in silence, in sovereignty, in the sacred refusal to play small just to be seen. And now he sees, but she is already gone, and in her wake, he is left with the very thing he tried to avoid all along, himself. And that is when the true chase begins. There comes a moment in every man's journey when the silence grows louder than her voice ever did, when her absence becomes a symphony, when the ghost of her self-worth haunts him more intimately than her affection ever held him, and he begins to unravel, not because she wounded him, but because she stopped holding space for a version of him that refused to evolve. It is here, in this quiet place, where the masculine feels the true edge of his resistance, not at the hand of confrontation, but in the void left behind by a woman who chose herself. Because a woman who values herself doesn't leave a trail of destruction. She leaves an imprint, not just on his memory, on his soul. She becomes the echo between his thoughts, the standard against which he will measure every future moment of intimacy, not because she asked to be remembered, but because she finally stopped offering what he hadn't earned. And now everything feels counterfeit. The laughs are shallower, the intimacy, performative. The validation he once craved now tastes like sand, because real energy, real feminine radiance, is not something a man forgets. It's something that restructures him. Her departure was not an exit, it was an initiation. He was not abandoned. He was confronted with the weight of what it means to be in the presence of someone who holds themselves sacred. This is what modern love has forgotten, that a woman in her full feminine power does not need to demand love. She commands it, not through volume, through vibration. And when she reclaims her energy, it sends a ripple through the masculine psyche, a crack in the armor, a shift in the illusion. Because she didn't just walk away. She stopped offering reflection. She stopped mirroring his potential. She stopped pretending her softness could fix his hardness. She handed his evolution back to him like a key he wasn't ready to hold. And without her light, he has to navigate the dark, alone. And this is where transformation begins. Not in her return, but in her departure. Because men do not change when a woman teaches them. They change when a woman stops protecting them from themselves. And that is the most soul-rattling silence of all. The absence of her care, the void of her empathy, the disappearance of the emotional scaffolding she built without his help. He believed she would wait, that she would always be there, as if her loyalty were a given, as if her love were a resource he could draw from without ever tending to the well. But she is no longer a well. She is the storm, the flood, the ocean that rises when a woman finally remembers she was never meant to be a reservoir for another's healing. She was meant to be a force. And now he feels it, the shift, the imbalance, the craving to chase something that no longer wants to be caught. But the chase isn't about the woman anymore. It's about the man he almost became in her presence, because she saw it, not the version he performed, the one beneath, the one even he hadn't met yet. And that reflection, that glimpse of his possible wholeness, was the most intimate thing he's ever been given. It terrified him, so he pulled away. But now, he can't look at himself the same. And that's what he's chasing. The feeling of being called higher, the memory of being known, the echo of her energy wrapped around his becoming. And this is where the polarity lives, the sacred current between a woman who chooses herself and a man who finally sees what that means. She no longer moves toward him. She no longer reaches. She no longer contorts. She simply is, unmoved, unbothered, unfolded in her own truth. And from that space, she becomes myth. Not fantasy, myth, the kind of woman whispered about in the quietest parts of a man's memory, the one he measures others against, not for their beauty but for the weight of their presence. She becomes the question he cannot answer. How did I lose something I never fully had? But she was never meant to be had. She was meant to be met. And now he knows. He didn't meet her, not fully, not soul to soul. Because when you meet a woman at the level of her wholeness, you don't keep her, you join her. And he wasn't ready to join, he was only ready to sample. Now the hunger begins, not for a woman, but for wholeness, for meaning, for the self-respect that mirrors the reverence she had for herself. She never said it, but she taught him, you cannot hold what you will not rise to become. And now, he rises, not for her, but because of her. Because the path back to her is not through pursuit, it is through transformation. And he knows, he will either become the man her energy spoke to, or spend a lifetime haunted by the one he refused to become. And her? She's not watching, she's not waiting, she's blooming. Because when a woman truly values herself, she doesn't just make men chase, she makes them ascend. He will never admit it out loud, that a woman who didn't raise her voice, who didn't demand his time, who didn't try to prove her worth, has taken up permanent residence in his subconscious. He will speak her name with reverence or with denial, but either way, her imprint lives where his ego cannot reach. Because the feminine, when embodied with self-worth, doesn't touch a man's body first. She touches his mythology. She rewrites the narrative he's been living, not with seduction, but with soul. He thought he wanted attention, praise, control, a woman who would orbit around his potential like a planet caught in gravity. But she didn't orbit. She became gravity. And when she pulled back, he realized how many others had only been weightless satellites, easy to grasp, impossible to feel. Because nothing feels like the woman who has nothing to prove. Her silence dismantled every illusion. Her distance did not wound him, it revealed him. And now, he's no longer chasing her presence. He's chasing the version of himself that finally felt real in her gaze. Because she never needed him to become more. She only ever needed him to be true. And he wasn't. He was curated, performing, leading with mask, not marrow, offering charm instead of presence, routine instead of reverence. And when she felt that, when her intuition whispered, he is not here yet, she didn't dramatize. She didn't warn him. She didn't give him a final plea. She vanished, but not as a punishment, as an initiation. Because only through her absence would he ever confront his own. Only through her sovereignty would he remember the part of himself that was asleep. Only through her example would he begin the inner pilgrimage from ego to essence. And it hurts. God, it hurts. To realize too late that you were loved in the rarest way. Not for what you gave, but for who you could have become. She saw the God in him, before he remembered the God in himself. And that is the most terrifying love of all. Not the one that flatters you, not the one that clings, but the one that holds up a mirror and says, rise or I disappear. Not with words, not with threats, with stillness, with standards, with the unshakable vibration of a woman who has remembered who she is. This is what makes her unforgettable. She didn't try to be. She simply aligned herself so deeply with her own truth that everything false fell away from her life, including him. And now he walks through every moment with the taste of something he cannot replicate. She is not in his phone. She is not in his bed. She is not in his reach. She is in his becoming. She is in the tension between the man he is and the man she reflected. She is the echo in his chest when lesser lovers whisper empty things. She is the silence between his distractions, the pause after laughter, the depth missing from moments that used to feel full. She is gone, and yet she is everywhere. Because the feminine that values herself becomes archetype. She becomes blueprint. She becomes myth. He will meet others. Of course he will. The world is full of beautiful, willing, gentle-hearted women. But few will speak to his soul. Few will see through his surface without trying to save it. Few will challenge his shadows without trying to heal them. Few will leave, and bless him by doing so. Because leaving, when done in full self-love, is the most honest expression of feminine truth. And now, his chase is no longer romantic. It is existential. He is not chasing her footsteps. He is chasing what she stood for, what she awoke in him, what she demanded without demanding a thing. And he will wrestle with this, silently, maybe forever, because he knows there was no game, no manipulation, no strategy. She simply stopped lowering her standards to accommodate his stagnation. And in doing so, she created space. Space for him to rise or remain. But either way, without her. And that choice, that freedom, that void, is the consequence of not recognizing the sacred when it stood before you. He knows now. But knowledge comes after awakening. And awakening always costs something. For him, it was her. And for her, she is not bitter. She is not vengeful. She does not gloat. She simply glows. Because when a woman values herself, she does not chase, she does not beg, she does not wait. She remembers. She remembers her worth is not tied to who chooses her. She remembers that her depth is not too much. Others are simply not deep enough. She remembers that she is the current, not the driftwood, the flame, not the moth, the soul, not the shadow. And from this place, this temple of self, she walks not to escape him but to return to herself. And there, she finds everything she thought she had to earn: peace, power, presence, wholeness. And he watches. From the distance he created, longing for what was never withheld, only unrecognized. And now he chases, not because she lured him, not because she needs him, but because she left behind the rarest of gifts, the memory of being loved by a woman who loved herself more. And that is the love that cannot be replaced, the love that does not beg to stay, the love that requires you to rise or release. The kind of love Carl Jung would say doesn't meet the ego, it destroys it, so the soul can finally breathe. And she breathes freely now. Because when you value yourself, you stop looking back. You don't chase, you become. And everything that is truly meant for you will feel your absence and move toward your light without even knowing why. Because your energy speaks louder than your voice. Because your silence echoes longer than your presence. Because the woman who values herself becomes the destination,